Welcome to Simply Verified Beef podcast. And today we've got practical plastics recycling. We've got a couple of guests on today from Cleanfarms and from the Alberta Beef Producers Boards who are working on some things about plastics recycling and some projects as it relates to just reducing some of those things around the farm and how that relates to VBP, the Verified Beef Production Plus program we will get into. So without further ado, I will throw it over to Assar Grinde to introduce himself and your relation with plastics recycling.
Thank you. My name's Assar Grinde. I'm a cow-calf producer in central Alberta, and I'm the Alberta Beef Producers representative to the Agricultural Plastics Recycling Group, and I'm the current chair of that organization.
And Kim Timmer from Cleanfarms.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I work with Cleanfarms, and we're an organization that helps farmers manage the plastics that are used on their farm. And we work quite closely with industry to do that. I like to tell people that I've had a front row seat to ag plastics recycling in Canada since about 2010, and so much has happened since then. So I've got a lot to talk about. But really, I tend to get involved in programs when they're transitioning sort of from the pilot phase into a more permanent phase. So I work closely with government as well as with industry. And just really happy to have the opportunity to talk about this important topic.
Great. And thank you both for joining me today. So we're just going to kick it off and get right into things. So single-use plastics are a tool that we use on farms and ranches for a variety of reasons. Assar, you could start out with just addressing a few of the items of concern and why they might be of concern.
Yep, for sure. The big ones that most beef producers use in Alberta would be silage pit plastic, and then also net wrap and twine. The net wrap and twine, they have concerns both for machinery, like if you leave it lying around, it can, especially the net wrap, can get into bearings and stuff. And there's also software disease issues. So there's been some articles in the Canadian Cattlemen's in the past about that, and it's animals ingesting net wrap and twine and plastic, and it gets balled up in their GI tract and can cause death. So that's a concern. And then also just the disposal of it, like it's kind of an eyesore when it's blowing around the countryside, and some landfills don't want to deal with it. Unfortunately, there are still some people burning it, which is a huge health issue, and it looks really poor for our sustainability claims as an industry. So those are the big ones. The funny thing is, plastic, it's so important for our industry, and we need it for so many things on the farm, but the reasons why it's so valuable as a product is the same reason that it's an issue after we're done using it.
You mentioned just from the Alberta perspective, but I would hazard to guess, I'm from the Maritimes and have spent some time in provinces all over Canada, and those are the same things that are top of mind across the country. So it is something that we deal with all over from coast to coast, with both the challenges and the opportunity of utilization. Kim, do you want to have anything to add about some of the concerns?
Yeah, I'm glad you threw this to Assar first, because I usually throw this to a producer for their impact, for their sort of thought. I like the way everyone sort of stressed that these are tools. It's about, whether it's delivering a technology to the farm, ensuring optimal growing conditions, it's really important to stress that they protect feed and commodities that ultimately feed livestock and families here in Canada and around the globe. So you need to get that on the table. And I know farmers put a lot of effort into finding the tool that gives them performance as well as protection. So I do really think the onus is on others just to explore recycling programs for these important tools. I like to sort of say, regardless of the material, we heard from Assar, and I've heard it elsewhere, is that farmers want to make sure the product's managed properly at end of life. So just another way to look at it, we sometimes like to look at it in terms of opportunity. Is there low-hanging fruit that we can add to an existing program? Is there an end market available for that item? And then we can focus our work on proper preparation, looking into logistics, and really sort of building consensus around what to do there.
If I can bring up one more thing, I mean, I'm from strictly a beef operation. We don't do any cropping, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention grain bags. Like they're probably the biggest single source of plastic in Alberta. They are an important topic for recycling for sure.
When we think about what some of those farm plastics recycling programs look like, even though we know that they aren't available all over the world, or all over the country, I guess maybe Kim, I'll throw it over to you. What are some of the farm plastics recycling programs that are available?
So I'm clearly biased. The program that I always point to just as a real success is the empty pesticide jug program. It's been around since 1989. It's available across the country, and we recovered 6.2 million containers in 2021. Great example of stewardship, real life circularity. You might find it interesting to know the plastic we collect is often incorporated into new products like farm drainage tile, which is used, quite frequently on farms in Eastern Canada and even around, urban basements. And so one of the challenges with a mature program like that is you're always striving to 100%. So we have a 75% recovery rate, and our members are really pushing to increase that recovery rate for a variety of reasons, but sort of to hop on what Assar said, it's really about a demonstration of sustainability and good stewardship. And we talked briefly about the grain bag recycling challenges. I always point out that there is a program in Saskatchewan. Our involvement started in 2018. It now has a recovery rate of 67%. So not bad for 4 years in. But when we look at challenges, I tend to capture them in three buckets. And it all relates to asking stakeholders and others to really look at ag plastic as a commodity and treating it like one. So the first challenge would relate to minimizing contamination and correct preparation. So whether it's at a farm or a collection site, we need different materials separated at the farm level, at the collection site level, and at consolidation. And a friend of mine used to say to me, you don't mix your beans and your corn, right? And so that applies here. And so that's where communication, education, and promotion really plays a role. Number two is around logistics. Contractors, logistics providers, they're not used to dealing with these materials. When you say a grain bag to somebody, they think of what you get in maybe a grocery store or something you see at a brewery. We're talking about 300-pound, 9 mil thick bags. Anyhow, so this all requires really specialized collection, handling, and there are a few providers that have that specialty, although it's growing. And then it's also about convenience. And so really when it comes to large volume users, we need to explore whether on-farm collection might work better. The fewer times this material is handled, the better. And then lastly, we need to find end markets for these materials. We're not in the business of creating a pile of plastic for the sake of creating a pile of plastic. I know producers, they want reassurances that they're going to put in that extra time to separate, to shake out, to reduce contamination. They want to know it's being recycled. For us, when dealing with recyclers, they want to be assured that there's a steady supply of material so that they can make investments in equipment and lines. So again, we need to make sure that we can provide them with a consistent, high quality feedstock in a way that they need it. So that was a long answer, but that's how we typically look at this challenge across Canada.
Do you have anything to add, Assar? Because I've got, I know that there's a project that's near and dear to your heart, but is there?
No, for sure. I'll just, in Alberta, we don't have any permanent programs right now for plastic except the unwanted herbicide jugs. But for on-farm ag plastic stuff, we have a pilot program. We actually have two pilot programs running right now. The provincial one is for grain bags and twine. We can talk about that in a minute. And then Cleanfarms is operating a separate silage pit plastic recycling pilot program in just a few municipalities. But Kim, did you want to just briefly mention what products are available for recycling in which provinces? Because you probably have a better idea than that, like Quebec and Manitoba and Saskatchewan, probably other ones.
Happy to. So the one that's near and dear to my heart is the empty container jug recycling program, and that really is available for coast to coast. It does run on a permanent basis, so farmers can rely on it year over year. The next thing we take a look at are empty seed, pesticide, and inoculant bags. That's been available east of Ontario since about 2016. Got it through Roots and PEI because there was a particular fungicide product that we needed to find a solution for those bags. What's really exciting is that program is being expanded to the west this year. So seed, pesticide, and inoculant bags, there's going to be a collection program for them in Western Canada starting next year. You gave a shout out to our unwanted and obsolete collection program. That's a disposal program, not really a recycling program, but that's really, really important. And then it's all the really exciting new initiatives that are underway. And so that silage plastics in select areas of BC. I'll move to Saskatchewan. We talked about a permanent grain bag program, but there's pilots for silage plastics as well as twine. In Manitoba, we just got a grain bag and twine program off the ground on a permanent basis. But I'll talk about some of the work we're doing with Dairy Farmers of Canada to do other stuff. And then I say Ontario, Quebec, again, silage plastics, really a focus on the products that are used to protect hay and silage. And then over to PEI, same thing. What's interesting, and to sort of touch on sort of what Assar said about permanent programs and all that stuff, you're going to see a lot of activity in Quebec as well as PEI over the next couple of years.
Assar, you have, again, we mentioned the project that's near and dear to your heart. You've got this pilot project that you were sort of integral in starting, from what I hear, in Alberta. So can you just give a little background about this? Is a good example of how something can come from grassroots and really roll up if producers are keen to get working?
Yeah, for sure. I think it started in 2016. I was just sick of stockpiling silage pit plastic on the farm. And I was a delegate with Alberta beef producers at the time. And so I brought a resolution forward at a fall meeting to get ABP to lobby the government for a permanent solution. And then in 2017, there was actually multiple resolutions from producers came in. And then at that annual general meeting, the delegate body passed that resolution to lobby the government. And at the same time, there was a lot of other commodity groups and organizations like the rural municipalities and the agricultural fieldmen and stuff that were also really concerned about the volume of ag plastics coming to landfills and what to do about it. And so we formed a group called the Alberta Ag Plastics Recycling Group to represent all the interests from retailers to recyclers and then all the different agricultural commodity groups. So Alberta Milk and all of the cereal commissions and then Alberta beef producers and stuff, we're all involved with that. And so we were lobbying the government, and I got assigned because I was one of the ones that brought the motion forward. So I got assigned to be Alberta beef producers representative on the Ag Plastics Working Group. And I'm still here like 6 years later, and I know way more about ag plastic recycling than I thought I ever would. So yeah, that's where it started from. And we successfully lobbied the government. 2019, they gave some funding to start a 3-year pilot program just for twine and grain bags. And then through a tender process, Cleanfarms was chosen as the operator of that program. So they're operating the pilot, and it was extended until next fall. Yeah, we have 40 collection partners in Alberta, municipalities and things, and they operate about 90 collection sites through the province.
It sounds like after a little bit of work and bureaucracy, so you got something that's actually got legs. So that's really nice to hear.
And we're still lobbying. Like, it's a pilot program. Like Saskatchewan has a permanent program, and Manitoba does as well. So we're still lobbying the government, to transition it from a pilot to a permanent program, but that can take some time. So we'll keep working. And
Kim, you mentioned a little bit before about the program with Dairy Farmers of Canada. And again, from being from Eastern Canada, sometimes we've got a little bit of a closer link with the dairy farmers groups. And I sort of saw some of the promotion, some of the things that had been cooking on that program. So are there any learning? Can you give a little bit of a brief background on what that pilot looks like and what some of the learnings might have been?
Sure. So we've been working with Dairy Farmers of Canada since fall of 2021. And the focus of that work was really to give dairy farmers access to a tool that makes recycling ag plastics more convenient. And the particular tool we focused on was an on-farm compactor, and it really densifies the ag plastics on the farm. And we also wanted to make sure we were getting farmer feedback into the tool. We've used these in Quebec in previous years, but every region is slightly different. So we needed to make sure that we were accessing and building a tool that works for farmers. And so I don't like to focus too much on the compactor, but it is something that does tend to capture people's attention. It's about densifying material on the farm. It keeps that plastic cleaner, and it reduces the number of trips that a farmer needs to make to a collection site. So we're in year one, and I can tell you that farmers are keen to provide feedback. And one of my favorite anecdotes, and it's something seen over and over again. And it really sort of just demonstrates the willingness to get involved. So we'll deliver a compactor to a farmer and they'll give it a try and they'll immediately enhance it. They'll add something to make it more useful for their farm. And I think that's though it's really an indication that this is an important issue. I'm going to talk about one instance where we worked with a group of farmers from Kent District, British Columbia. They were running their own program since 2013, and kudos to them for keeping them going. But their local recycler had stopped accepting the plastic. And so there was a great deal of frustration because all of that work they put into it was all of a sudden stalled. And so with the support from Dairy Farmers of Canada, we were able to keep that particular program going. And so I'd say one of those learnings was the need for that specialized support and expertise that I think Assar has developed over the years. But this project allowed us to deliver it in that region. So as an example, this group was transporting their ag plastics in tote bags. And so the compactors made it so much more efficient. So one bale from a compactor is the equivalent of 3 tote bags. So it's all about efficiency. So I think the key learning from that was really we need to tap into whether it's experiences or end markets or expertise in other regions. So we're really proud that we're able to facilitate getting ag plastics from that region to an end market in Bashaw, Alberta. Just really, I think there's so much more work we can do in this space, but really the support from Dairy Farmers of Canada, I think it really elevated the profile, of this group in BC, but also what others are doing around the country. And it's all interrelated, right? So the work in Alberta is pulled on for the work in BC. And so it's really great that there's conversations and connections going around the country.
I actually just bought one of the compactors for my own operation. I haven't tried it yet. It just got delivered this week, but being able to densify it is a huge issue. And because this is a VBP podcast, I know Ryan Casco, you were talking about the dairy farmers, but in Alberta, some of the pilot sites were actually big feedlots. And so Ryan Casco with Casco Feeders, they were volunteered to take one of these compactors. And he said it was less work than he actually thought it would be, mostly a cultural change, just a shift in how we do things. Like rather than ripping the plastic off your pit and dumping it in a pile of dirt and dealing with it 6 months from now, it's just about taking the clean stuff. Every time you cut a strip off, when you fold it up, put it right into the compactor and then compacting it and managing the plastic right on farm when you're disposing of it rather than dealing with it later. And that way it stays clean. And it actually isn't a lot more work than what we were doing prior. It's just a change in our mindset on how we deal with things. And that's the biggest takeaway I've had with plastics. And what I tell farmers is start small. Like a lot of things, if you're doing the twine program for the recycling on the twine pilot, don't try to collect 100% of it because you'll drive yourself crazy. Most twine, if you pull it off a clean bale, keep the clean stuff, put that in the recycling bag. If it's a dirty bale, don't even bother trying to clean it. Throw that in the disposal bag. And you'll be amazed with what a difference it makes just doing the small things. Do what's easy and go from there.
That was one of the things that comes up, that bubbles up a little bit, because we're in a region of the country that at least our farm still has access to, like a landfill will take it, so they'll pick it up at the edge of the road. But our watershed has been talking about a recycling program because they cover lots of municipalities and not all of them have the landfills that will pick up like that. And again, I think this comes back to the technology has just come so far in such a relatively little amount of time. Because I think the early recycling programs, everything had to be like almost washed out clean. What is the realism? And I really love the way that you said that, because you don't have to be 100%. If it's a mucky bale, if it's a mucky piece of silage because you're putting it out in the middle of April and there's muck around, then just turf that into the old way and then keep the new stuff going. So any comments on I guess that cleanliness, or if there's any of those producers thinking, well, this is going to be too tough? I know you touched on it a little bit before. Kim, do you have any comments?
There's a couple things that Assar mentioned that's really, really important. You're absolutely right. You start small and you get used to it. I have a colleague who says, if you want to give me, a Ziploc bag full of twine, I'm okay with that. It's just about getting you into that process. So we do recommend that you start small. It's about working with farms of all sizes. So Assar mentioned feedlots. That's not reflective of what you're seeing about across Canada, and you have to find different ways to make this work depending on the volume of plastics that you use and what's available in your community. I do like conversations about contamination because it gets you thinking that this is not garbage. This is recycling. And I think what we're seeing is we like to say maybe less than 10% contamination. I don't want you to quote me on that number, but there's contamination in ag plastics, and then there's contamination with residential recycling, and it's completely different. It's a completely different conversation. Like dirt will fall off, organic material will fall off. You don't want any rocks or anything in your silage plastics. That's going to damage machinery. And it's about separation because they're different commodities.
Kim might be able to touch on this more, but I think it's really important that there's end markets for it. And you did mention it earlier, and that's we're lucky in Alberta. Like, we have two of the three recycling plants in North America that'll take grain bags are in Alberta, and one of them started up solely because of the pilot program and the permanent program for grain bags in Saskatchewan. So all of a sudden there is a dedicated supply that they know, okay, if I'm an entrepreneur, I can build a plant and I'll have a supply of plastic that I can turn into something. Permanent programs, we won't get into this, but extended producer responsibility is something that people will hear, and they'll have to look into what it means. But that's what Cleanfarms is. It's industry-led and driven, but the whole idea of making producers or users of a product pay for the disposal cost of that product at point of purchase, my hope is that will encourage better products to be developed, whether they're more recyclable or drive the big companies to develop biodegradable net wrap or edible net wrap or edible sheet plastic. Like, in the long run, recycling, I think, is important, but years from now, I hope technology makes it so that we don't maybe not even have to use plastic, or the plastic is more recyclable. Yeah, that's long-term big picture, but I think it's really important for farmers to understand that that's kind of recycling is a step on the path to better technology.
And we could probably whole another 30 minutes on policy framework, and maybe that's an idea for next season.
Yeah. Just to build on one point Arthur made. I like where you went with recycling. We're on one part of the solution. It is about more circularity and making sure that plastics are recirculated in the economy. But it really is worthwhile to sort of look into sort of what happened in Bashaw, Alberta, because this is a great example of where when you can guarantee feedstock, a recycler, there are entrepreneurs out there, and they're going to make this happen. But I don't know what it is, Assar. It might be sort of 12 to 14 jobs in Bashaw, Alberta, are available because of the work Authors Group did, the permanent program in Saskatchewan, and that's a really important piece of the pie that maybe we have to do a better job of talking about as well.
So we're getting to the end of our time here, but in closing, do you folks have any recommendations for farms or ranchers that are wanting to get involved with farm plastics management or that sort of opportunity?
I would say it's likely, no matter where you live in Canada, that there's a pilot for at least one type of ag plastic you might be using, whether that's grain bags or twine. And even if it's just a pilot, try participating at a small scale, do what's easy, and see if it's something that you could keep doing on your farm. Because I'd say you're dealing with plastic anyways, whether you have to collect it to throw it in the landfill. If it's clean, why don't you just recycle it instead?
Yeah, you bet. And Kim?
I would just add that it's important to reinforce this is about mindset. So we mentioned that earlier. The solution is bigger than one farm or one region, and that example of the recycling plant in Bashaw getting up and off the ground because of developments elsewhere is a great example. And then I just sort of throw in that we also need to remind ourselves it's a new landscape, it's a new day. So some producers may have been involved in work 10 years ago, and unfortunately that may have shut down because recycling markets sort of taint. But really it's a new day, and it's worth looking at this again. Like you mentioned, technology is changing. This 5-6 years ago, this wasn't a topical issue, but now people talk about plastics. So I think we really have to sort of take advantage of the profile that this issue is getting right now. And enthusiasm from producers, from industry, from watershed groups, that's all going to sort of build into a long-term solution.
And the Verified Beef Production Plus program, we always talk about continuous improvement. So it's not like something that you need to fix or change, or it's not a metric that we need to hit tomorrow, but it is something I think that each farm and ranch can kind of keep in mind as they think about what items they're going to focus on in the next year, and maybe plastics recycling or a solution for the silage or silage plastic, or keeping that on top of mind as that improvement. So if I'm doing 50% of it this year, Assar, maybe I can try to get a few more bales, or change where I'm putting my bales so that they're not quite so mucky. Or
so I actually have a question for you. I'm a VBP certified operation, and we're doing our renewal this year. And so I'm just curious where ag plastics recycling would fit into the VBP renewal process.
So it'll fit into that environmental, the environmental planning module, where if you've got an environmental farm plan or whatnot, the auditors have changed a little bit about how sometimes they're asking their questions. It'll be fairly open-ended, but like they will ask, what are you looking to improve? Because there is this continuous improvement bit that probably when you did your audit a few years ago, because it was more about like, are you meeting or not meeting? So now we're running into this, it's about continuous improvement. So like, we don't want you to be where you were 5 years ago. We want sort of what's up next. So that's where it'll fit in. And the auditors, like we did have a podcast, the first one of this season was about the auditors, and they do talk to each other there, and they'll bring some of those things. So hopefully if they see that, if they're on Assar's ranch and you've got a really good idea, or this new compactor, like those are the things that through that audit network kind of get brought up. And then if the next auditor's on a farm and they're talking about, well, I've got all this silage plastic and blah, 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 it's an eyesore, then the auditors do, because they see a lot of places and they see a lot of things. I think they're a really good resource to kind of spread some of the good word.
Yeah, totally.
So with that, I would like to thank you folks for joining me today to just chat a little bit about ag plastics. And I think that probably there's way more to talk about than what we had time for today. Just do appreciate your time and energy for that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
And we'd like to also thank our sponsor, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, in communication with New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. And we will see you next month.